Right, guys, let's continue with the question. So we're now going to calculate your factory overheads. Right, so looking at the information given to us, so as we can see from the table, factory overheads has been calculated. Now remember, normally you are given a note, but in this particular case, as you can see, factory overheads given to us, you probably cannot see that amount, so let me just quickly erase this. All right, let's go back with our pen. So my factory overheads given to me at an amount of 227,240. Right, now always be careful because there might be additional information. So looking at the information given, and I'm now looking at information C, rent expense was omitted from the figures above. Okay, so immediately that figure now needs to be adjusted. So what I'm going to start off by doing, I'm going to start by bringing down this amount in brackets, and then we can adjust the figure. Right, so remember guys, I spoke about this last week, the week before. Bracket work is absolutely important. Right, so in brackets 227,240, and now I can go to my rent adjustment. So let's read the information first and then we'll calculate the actual adjustment itself. Rent expense was omitted from the figures above, so we obviously know that. Total rent paid for the financial year amounted to 87,100 Rand. The rent for March 2017 has been paid in advance. So immediately I'm looking at a prepaid expense. And remember, from your GARP matching principle, any expenses that have been prepaid for the next financial year obviously needs to be subtracted. The rent was increased by 650 Rand on the 1st of December 2016. 80% of this expense must be allocated to the factory and the balance must be regarded as an office expense. Right, so clearly lots of calculations, and I always recommend that you show the examiner your calculations, because remember, in the event of you getting this incorrect, you can always get some part marks. Right, so as you can see, I've already started. So my rent expense has been paid from the beginning of the year, 1st of March 2016, all the way through to the next financial year, the 31st of March 2017. In other words, I've paid a total of 13 months of rent. Okay, so clearly the month of March needs to be removed. It needs to be subtracted. But remember guys, because the rent increased during the financial year, I cannot simply take my rent expense and divide it by 13. Okay, so I've got to do a bit more to calculate the monthly rent and obviously the rent for the month of March in particular, because that rent needs to be subtracted. Now remember guys, as accounting students, there are various ways in which you can do this calculation. I prefer to use this specific method, but remember, if you are comfortable with another way in which you prefer doing the calculation, use the method that best suits you. Remember, whichever method you're going to use, you will still end up with the same answer, provided you didn't make a mistake while doing the calculation. Okay, so the method I'm going to use, the monthly rent increased. So if we go back to the information, the rent increased on the 1st of December by 650 Rand. So I want you guys to watch what I'm now doing. Right, so 1st of December, so somewhere here, and this is when my rent increased. So there was an increase of 650 Rand on the 1st of December. which means I've been paying an additional 650 Rand for how many months? So I want you guys now to count with me. So I've obviously paid it for the month of December, for the month of January, for the month of February, and the month of March. So in total, I've paid an additional 4 times 650 Rand for these 4 months. Okay, so let's calculate what that additional rent was in total. So 650, the increase, times 4, and I've been paying an additional 2,600 Rand. Okay, you guys with me? So if I now go back to my total rent paid, and remember the total rent paid is an amount of 87,100. I just need that figure. So 87,100. Let's just extend the page. So 87,100 minus the additional amount paid. So minus 2,600. And if I now divide this by 13, I will then get my original rent that I've been paying before the increase. Okay, so let's do that on our calculator. So remember, we're taking our total rent, 87,100. We are now subtracting 2,600, right? And then I am dividing by 13. So this gives me my original rent expense per month, 6,500 Rand before the increase. Okay, right, so now that I've got the original rent before the increase, 6,500, plus the monthly increase amount of 650, that is now going to give me my new rent, and in brackets, the total new rent that I'm paying per month. Okay, so 6,500, the old rent, plus the increase, 650, and that gives me an amount of 7,150. So immediately, guys, here's my adjustment amount. Now again, like I said earlier, you could use a different method. I know a lot of students like the monthly rent to equal to X, and then they solve for X. Use the method that you prefer. Use the method that works for you. Okay, right, now that I've got my adjustment, so what do I now do with this adjustment? So remember, 87,100, that is obviously my total rent. I am now going to minus 7,150, okay? And then let's now go back to the information. We are only interested in the actual factory. So what portion of the rent belonged to the factory? So here we go, 80% of this expense must be allocated to the factory, and the balance is an office expense. So the balance is obviously 20%. Now just yet, we do not need the 20%. We're just interested in the 80%. Right, so back to my calculation, times 80%, and the rent for the factory, an amount of, let's just clear that. Okay, I just want to move that, guys, so you can see. So 87,100 minus 7,150. And remember, only 80% belongs for the factory. So my expense, additional factory overhead, 63,960. Okay, so to this amount plus 63,960. Right, so obviously quite a bit of calculation to get to this amount, but like I said, show your calculation, okay? Right, so factory overheads almost calculated, so plus 227,240, and that gives me my total factory expenses, an amount of 291,200, okay? Right, so we're now ready to calculate what was our total manufacturing cost. So my total manufacturing cost. Okay, and remember guys, it's simply prime cost. You are now adding your factory overhead. So in total, to manufacture, right, plus my prime cost, 1,741,900, and that's giving me an amount of 2,033,100. Okay, right, we almost done. To my total manufacturing cost, I now need to add work in progress at the beginning of the year. Right, so how much went into production from last year that was not completed for this financial year? What was your work in progress? So if we go back to the information, work in progress stock, at the beginning of the year, 76,000. So one easy mark, 76,000, no calculation, all you're doing is adding this amount. Okay, next line, we're now going to subtract. So less work in progress at the end of the year. Right, now if I go back to the information, right, immediately I notice that this figure is not given to me. Okay, so clearly this figure is missing. So work in progress at the end of the year, not given to me. And also looking at the information, they're clearly not giving me my total cost of production. Okay, so I want to just fill that in. So my total production cost for the year, right? I want to go back to the information and show you guys. So if I scroll through the information, right, you guys can quickly look through the information. You can clearly see that total production cost is not given to me, right? Which means I've got two unknowns. Okay, now I want you guys to think about this. How are we going to calculate total production costs for the year if we're not given work in progress at the end of the year? While you guys are thinking, I think let's have another break so you guys can quickly think about this, how we're going to calculate this amount, and hopefully by the end of the break, you guys would have figured this out. So I'll see you guys in a bit.